Hello everyone, welcome to Bonnie Carolee Makes Cards. I have two cards featuring Pinkfresh Studio's You Are Amazing and the Frame Builders Botanical Circle die set. So let's get started. I began by ink blending Bristol Smooth cardstock with Distress Oxide inks. The ink colors were applied randomly. For this first panel, I'm working with Picked Raspberry, Wilted Violet, and Blueprint Sketch. Once the white space is completely filled in, I go back reapplying the colors, overlapping them to get a nice smooth blend. This process does take a bit of time, and several applications of color are required so that it is difficult to see where one color begins and the next starts. When you achieve a gradient between the colors, you know you are done. For the second panel, I chose fresh citrus colors, squeezed lemonade, spiced marmalade, and twisted citron. Because the Distress Oxide inks need a fair amount of drying time, I protect the panel with a piece of paper as I'm applying the color. So this was the point where things went a little bit sideways for me. The You Are Amazing stamp is a slimline, and it is a little bit too long for the regular sized Misty. So this is when I have two voices in my head, one cautionary, the other completely reckless. Don't do it, you'll wreck your background that you've spent all that time inking. And the other one encouraging me to go ahead, you can apply enough pressure where that stamp is running off the edge. Well, I couldn't. And this is when I sat back and thought about what I could do with this panel because I really didn't want to redo it. Maybe just a little bit more pressure. No. So after this panel was sort of inked with faded jeans, I used clear embossing powder and heat embossed it. What started off as a slimline card was about to become an A2 sized one. For the second panel, I just laid the stamp down on my glass craft mat. It sticks well and there's no need to worry about any slippage. The stamp was inked with carved pumpkin. I laid the panel over top of the stamp, being careful not to shift it, and then applied even pressure with my hand. As with the first panel, clear embossing powder was applied and it was heat embossed. This panel was cut using the second largest die in Pinkfresh Studio Slim Ornate Banner. The first panel was die cut with Pinkfresh Studio's diagonal stitch circles. To help the leaves stand out a bit more from their background, they were painted with watered down white gouache. In spite of all the leaves, the painting went very quickly. Inside a splatter box, both of the panels were splattered also with watered down gouache. I used a No. 1 paintbrush to keep the splatter quite fine. Using the same dies that were used to cut the panels, white sheet foam was cut. Nina Classic Crest 110 pound cardstock was die cut using the largest dies from diagonal stitch circles and slim ornate banners. These would act as layers for the panels. And now for the assembly. The ink blended panel was attached to the foam, which was then attached to the white cardstock panel. To get good contact between the foam and the paper, these panels were left underneath something heavy to dry completely. The same Distress Oxide inks used to stamp the leaves were used for the sentiments. The sentiment for the citrusy card was stamped with carved pumpkin and the other one with faded jeans. They were both embossed with clear embossing powder. Dies from Simon Says Stamp sentiment labels were used to trim down the sentiments. The sentiments were mounted on foam and adhered to the cards. The Frame Builders Botanical Circle comes with two dies. For this card, I used just the leafy die to create 5 die cuts that would frame the circle. The frame portion of the die cut was trimmed off so that I was just left with a curved leafy branch. Just a couple of dots of glue was used on the first leaf to attach it to the stitched circle base. The second end leaf on the inside of the branch was attached to the ink blended panel. All 5 of the die cuts were adhered in this manner. The result was a very dimensional wreath around the blended ink circle. Clear iridescent sequins were added to the card. I like to use Nouveau Precision glue for embellishments. The sequins were topped up with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. Morning Dew dries clear and leaves a beautiful jewel-like appearance to the sequins. I decided to add in some of the die cuts from the Frame Builder's Botanical Circle to this card as well. I did wait until the next day so that the Morning Dew drops were completely dry. 2 of the leafy die cuts and the flower die cut were trimmed down to create a floral spray. Just the end of each of the 3 die cuts were adhered to the card so that they would have a dimensional appearance. And that wraps up this pair of cards featuring Pinkfresh Studio's You Are Amazing and the Frame Builder's Botanical Circle die set. As always, I appreciate your visit.